What is up, ninjas? My name is Emerald, and today we're going to be discussing the techno rolling bass. Now my goal by the end of this tutorial, guys, is to have you guys making techno rolling bass lines like a pro. And in order to do this, we're going to have the right kick, we're going to have the right bass line set in place. Creating a techno rolling bass line is going to have a few different variations, but at the end of the day, it's all going to come down to the basics. And today we're going to be tackling those basics, and then from there, I'll show you guys what you can do differently to get different style of rolling bass lines. We're going to be doing this inside of Ableton. As you guys know, that is my DAW of choice. Now there is a saying out there, guys, I don't know how exactly it is, but if you have turd and you polish it, at the end of the day, it's still going to be polished turd. So make sure that when you're picking the sounds, when you're picking the kick, that it sounds close to what you kind of want it to resemble. Don't try to have a kick and try to turn it into another kick when it's not meant to be that style of kick. Now when it comes to these rolling bass lines as well, guys, placement is everything. Respecting the kick space, respecting the rolling bass line space, and respecting the subs bass line takes you a long way where it gets close to where you need it to be. Now, as you guys know, I've been working on a new techno soundbang for you guys called the Paradox, which will be coming out either late February or early March. It's currently in the works, so if you guys have any tutorial suggestions or sound suggestions that you might want to see in this pack, make sure to leave them down in the comments below so that I can listen to the song and see if I can add it to the pack as well. Now, with that being said, guys, let's get straight into Ableton, where we're going to start rolling some bass lines.
All right, guys, so here we are. I have a kick from a sample pack which sounds like this. Massive ass kick. We run it through spec. Has a lot of low end. Now, the first important thing, guys, is the type of kick that you're using. What I find is that if you're going to be going for a techno song where you want to have a rolling bass line, you're going to have a shorter kick. The reason for that is you want to make room for that bass line. Now, there is an exception to this, and that is going to be that if the kick has all the low end you need and you're not going to be putting a sub under it because this kick is just too motherfucking big, aka you have all of this pretty much taken up, you can still have a rolling bass line on top of this, but you're going to have to exclude the sub out. However, here what we're going to be doing, guys, is pretty simple. So I'm going to be using some of the sounds from the new pack, the Paradox one. Not done yet. It doesn't have all the sounds, but we're gonna use it here, and we're gonna go with the sub first. So having a sub, guys, usually a sine wave will do you good. Here we're running this sine wave through a low pass, and then it's just the envelope on this is no sustain and a bit of decay, so it's more of a boom 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 kind of sub that you would put under a kick to give it more low end. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is go with a key of G, which is gonna be more of a friendly key when it comes to the bass, and we're just gonna lay that across there. Okay, cool. Now, this is where the placement part of your rolling bass will come into play. So as you guys have seen here, we're going to have pretty much this big kick, and we're going to have a big sub, and then we're still going to have to add a rolling bass on top. Question is, how do we make that all fit? How do we respect space? That's the important thing. If you can respect space, you're going to go a long way with it. First thing we can do is maybe shorten the kick. I don't like that big subbiness that it has to it. So that's the first thing I can do. Now, to shape a kick, what you have at your disposal, first off, if you're in Ableton, is that you can just use the fades feature to kind of just slow it down and get that sort of kick. If we have that, that's going to instantly sound a lot better than what we had before. You know, not the greatest, but it's starting to fit a bit better. However, if I have this, that's just too much. All right, so what I like to do is usually here, let's say I have this loop, I like to use LFO tool for that. One of the few reasons is because if I'm going to be doing all my sidechaining with LFO tool, then I can see how long the kick is, and I can inverse the LFO I have for the kick for the space. I can see through the waveform graph when I click this on how long the kick is. So here, for instance, if I set this all up and I play the kick by itself, you can see that the kick is pretty much taking all the way to the halfway mark. So I can easily have my sub get a sidechain where it's not allowed to come through until we hit that halfway mark. We might get a click here, so we're going to shift this a little bit to the left so that we don't get that click that comes from instant changes, as well as making the sub sidechain before the kick even comes in. Think of it as a look ahead for a limiter or a compressor, which is what they usually do. So here, if we have this now, pretty cool. So I have the kick at -6 here. I'm going to have the sub. I'm going to use span to level that. So I like to use span if the track is kind of loud to kind of level that. My quality control usually is going to be that -30. If my bass is above -30, I added too much. If it's a little bit below it, I'm okay. But if it's way below it, when I'm running this again with like an ozone preset or having it loud, as loud as the track's going to be, then I can kind of say, okay, this is around the good spot. So you can see right now, We're at that negative 30 mark, so we should be good. However, you can feel like, it feels like the kick doesn't even belong with that sub. The kick is just too big. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just use this LFO tool to shape the kick. So I'm gonna kind of have this here. So here you can see the outline. The gray is what it used to be, and the red is the new version of it. So it lost a little bit of weight. But let's see if we can get this out. Let's clean that off, and we're gonna just get that a little bit short. Now there's a reason to this madness of why I'm cutting the kick this low here, because the rolling bass is going to hit here, here, and here. A lot of times having the kick not be in those areas when the rolling bass comes in is a wise thing to do. Again, it's all about the placement of your sounds in your mix. All right, so maybe here a little bit more reducement. Let's check that span one more time, as this can kind of alter our frequency. I can make that LFO to just a little, or sorry, that sub a bit loud. Around there should be good. Now, the rolling bass, guys, it can be a lot of things. You can have a tom, you can have anything with a bit of tonal. Just make sure it's in key. However, I'm going to use the more popular soft for this. So we're going to go here with the Rolling Magic. Let's do the 2, which is a saw, and we're gonna lay that out. Now, if you've ever made trance and you know how to program a rolling bass line, it's actually pretty simple. So we're gonna hit it on the 1, 2, 3 here. So the 2, 3, and 4 of a bar. So the reason I say that 1.1.2, 1.1.3, 1.1.4, and we're just gonna lay that across. That should give you a standard rolling bass, which sounds pretty good in its own right. Okay, now with the sidechain on that, we can be a little bit more lenient and move it more to the left. As remember, the kick, we've kind of crippled it. It's lost a bit of weight, and it's also lost a little bit of tonus, length. Okay, cool. Now the problem here is that, as you guys know, we do have a sub with a fuck ton of low end, so the rolling bass is gonna fight with it. So what I can do here is use an EQ. In fact, I'm gonna use an EQ on the sub and the rolling bass. The reasoning for the EQ, guys, is again, we want to make sure these guys fit together. Again, a lot of people will just put this and be like, oh, that sounds dope, but it doesn't make sense in a mix. This is where we come in with that rolling bass line, and we're gonna EQ the lows out, because again, we don't need those lows. The bass is already there. The sub is providing all the low end we need, as well as the kick on the first part of that bar. And the rolling bass is just there for rhythm. Just EQing it out, maybe lower it down a bit more. LFO tool, let's maybe give it a bit more to the right so it has more swing. There we go, let's try that. Starting to sound a lot cooler, as you can see. Okay, let's add a bit more highs to it. Now, the cool thing about the rolling bass, again, it adds rhythm. It makes your track feel faster than it actually is. We're at like 127 BPM right now. If I take it up, it's not the greatest, you know, it's kind of, yeah, but once we add that rolling bass, it starts to get very interesting. Now, moving along with this, we're going to mono legato this, which we needed to do anyways. The next thing we can do is give a bit of melody to that rolling bass. You know, this is kind of a standard driven, but a lot of times you're going to hear movement in that rolling bass and different variations of that. First one is that we can still have sort of like a rolling bass if you want, that's a lot slower. This can be heard in tracks from Weba and whatnot, and honestly I referenced one of his for this version here, where it's just a boom, 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 boom. This one is pretty cool, reminds me a bit of Tech House, and you can kind of put one in octave. So other thing maybe we could do is just be like, you know what, let's just have this. And we'll have that. You know, this is where it starts to get, again, very interesting. Other things with the rolling bass we could do is possibly have it to where we had it before, the standard driven one, and then just add arpeggiated melodies to it. These are going to be pretty much, you can have the rolling bass go up an octave. That's going to give you more of a kind of like a very percussive one, because we're going up on that one note here. It just makes it sound a little bit more like bounce. Mess with that sidechain a bit more. You can even have it like, so where the volume that thing is clipping, man. Okay, you guys are getting the idea there. Let's see, what else can we do with the rolling bass? Well, let's see, we can also do melodies where it's maybe just going down or up the scale. For instance, now, the idea here is that with the rolling bass, guys, you can also use anything that your mind pleases that is very percussive. It doesn't have to be the standard saw sound. It could be a sample, for instance. So I'm going to find one so I can show you guys what I mean. For instance, here, guys, I have a G House pack that I made a while back. We'll use this one that is labeled as the key of G. Let's just make sure here we have this, and then we have a sampler running enabled. So we're going to run it as low as we can because we obviously want something like very, very driven on. We're gonna have to EQ out the low end again, and then we just have to do a bit of subtractive EQing or sound design EQ. This means that you don't really care about the mixing of it. You just want the sound to sound how you want it, and then afterwards you can worry about the mix. Now be careful here because the length of the MIDI notes are really gonna matter in this situation. For instance, doesn't really give us a very driven bass line, more of a but if we lower it down, there we go. Let's try this one. Let's give it a bit more. Now you can argue that's sort of like a perk, but I still feel it gives that rolling bassline vibe to it. The other thing too is we can add kicks. Now, of course, we don't want the full out kick, but we want maybe the transient of the kick. That could also work really well. So here, what we're going to do is maybe move this a little bit to the left here, go like so. Now, the cool thing here, guys, is that this is where it starts to get a bit more experimental. You can also try adding pedals, overdrives, chorus to see if you can get something to sound unique. The rolling bass line does give power to the song in terms of rhythm, of course, but it's not the low end. It doesn't have any low information that you're going to get from it. In fact, what you want from it is mainly just that rhythm vibe to it. So you can also use drums. Now, let's assume that you're like, all right, Sin, that's all cool and dope, but I want my rolling bass line to be massive and I want the sub to follow that rolling bass line. Well, in that scenario, you just have to go back to what we had in the beginning, give the lows and ditch the sub. The reason I like to go more for that driving bass line with a sub is mainly because it gives you a little bit more freedom in making the bass line sound a little bit more unique. In this scenario, you want to go more for the basic bass line. So for instance here, what we're going to be doing is a rolling bass. Let's have these notes be fully there because we can control it with the amp envelope. Let's put it at G0. First things first, arm phase set to 0, guys, so that the phase doesn't switch around. If you guys are watching the Serum Masterclass, you would know this already. You can mess with the location of the saw where it starts. I usually like it at the top. That's where it's going to be at its fullest amplitude, and it gives a stronger initial hit. From here, filter. And then here we're going to control, just get that envelope right. Envelope 2 will go there, and then we're going to shape it. Let's get it louder. Let's get rid of the CQ. Here we got control that decay. If you wanted to have a fuller rounded sound, make sure to play with the slope here. If you want it to sound more acidy, go with a 24, give it a bit of resonance, but be careful, you might lose a bit of that low end, which in instance you're gonna need a fucking sub again. But let's open it up a little bit more. Okay, so hopefully these ideas help you guys out. Remember, the important thing here is that you don't have to be like, oh, Sen said all G's, man, hit all G's. No, every key is going to give you a different vibe. You can add melodies to it. Of course, you can do, you know, like you know, like very glitchy or very trippy ones, you can definitely have that melody. The important thing is that you understand how the rolling bass line works, how you can set it up, the different variations you can do, utilizing samples and whatnot, drums, and have fun with it. That's the important thing, guys, at the end of the day. Now, the last thing I do have to say with rolling bassline, guys, is don't let that limit you onto how many basslines you can have. The key here is that I could have up to 3 basslines going on in a drop, and it's rare to see it in techno. For instance, let's assume that I go back to what we had, where we had, you know, our beautiful sub hitting with the kick, with the beautiful side chain and all that. And let's assume I have a rolling bass line where, again, I'm paying attention to the placement, the space. I'm giving these guys room to breathe. That is the important thing. Let's say I have that rolling bass line. Let's make this be a little bit more squeaky. Let's have it be just all straight up. Let's make that the decay just mono legato that. Well, I can add another bass as long as I respect space. Obviously, remember, the space in a track is very important. So if I want to add another bass to this to add more rhythm, I can definitely do it. Last thing maybe I'll do is add like a more of a high bit wide bass. So for instance, here I'm adding this acid style sound, which you can debate. It's kind of like a bass line. We're going to get rid of that key track on the sound. And what I'm going to do is just add a bit of reverb to it, because for instance, without the reverb, now I want to make sure it's not on top of the rolling bass, which you can see the rolling bass is taking that up. So maybe I could do a cut more like so, have the, or I could have those frequencies but put reverb to push it more to the back of the mix. You know, the idea there is just make space for everything and you can get something cool. You can have 4 basslines as long as you make room. And I hope this tutorial helps some of you guys out with the rolling bass. If you guys have any more tutorial suggestions or sound requests for the pack that's coming out at the end of February or early March, I still can't say. It just depends on how fast we can get these sounds done, guys. Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys next time for another tutorial. You guys take care and peace out.